Please help me in welcoming Jamie Clarke.
Let's begin. I grew up in Calgary. Calgary's my hometown. I still live there. I was born and raised. And Calgary, well, Canadian boys are particularly supposedly supposed to play hockey, but my mom thought hockey was too violent, too dangerous, so she suggested that I climb mountains instead. We lived next to Calgary is sort of Canada's equivalent to Denver. Well, Boulder's got a lot of weird people, so maybe not Boulder, Colorado, but a lot of my friends live there, so I know. But Denver, Colorado, next to the Canadian Rockies, and this is what Calgary is. And because Mom didn't want me to play hockey, too violent, too dangerous, climb mountains. Okay, so I took that to heart. I began studying maps and exploring these mountains that rest just 100 miles to the west of our home. About age 12, I burst into the kitchen. Mom was whipping up a batch of cookies, mixing in the chips, and chocolate chips, my favorite. And I burst in and I said, Mom, I'm going to climb Mount Everest. Without skipping a beat, she turned to me and said, Son, I think you should play hockey. But at that point, I was committed to this idea of Mount Everest and the chances that I might be able to stand on its summit. And I spent the next 10 years trying to figure out how I could get onto a team, a group of Canadians I discovered in the late 80s were planning an expedition. They'd raised some $1 million. Canadian dollars, for about 150 grand US. And they were going, it's very painful, sad but true. They were going to climb this mountain. They were looking for a base camp manager, a technician, someone who could look after the satellite phones and the equipment, the technology, the laptops and so forth that they were taking with them, that they would connect with the media and with their sponsors, their investors back home. And they were looking for someone who had climbing skill and outdoor skill but could do this. And I filled that bill, which didn't take much to amaze the leadership. I think the intelligence of an average mountaineer is negligible to start with, so it didn't take much to baffle them. In fact, I think a lobotomy is a prerequisite for mountaineering. So, a few speeds and feeds, and bingo, I was on the trip. Silently in my own ego and arrogance and saturated testosterone-saturated mind at 21, I hoped that maybe someone would get sick or die, and I could take their place and go for the summit. Once I became friends with the rest of the team, I thought, well, maybe just sick. And that would work out fine. And off we went on that mountain in the fall of 1991 can we back up one? I went too fast. In the fall of 1991 to climb the peak that you see here, Mount Everest, the world's highest mountain. This is the north side of the mountain as seen from Tibet. This was our route straight up the north face, hiding behind a veil of cloud. You can just about see it. In the foreground are some prayer flags hung by our Sherpa teammates. You'll meet the Sherpas as we go. These prayer flags are hung in high mountain passes, the entryway to villages where the wind might catch them. The prayers written upon them then are lifted on the winds and carried to the gods they're dedicated to. And of course, I wasn't a Buddhist, but I figured we needed all the help we could get. Buddha, Allah, anybody come and help us get up this mountain. So the prayer flags were a wonderful addition to our expedition. I do quite a few presentations for school groups. My little sister's a school teacher. She often asks me to sneak into the school, and she's trying to impress a principal or something to have me come. It usually backfires, but I go anyway, and I address it. This group I recently did for her, the worst group of people I've ever addressed in my entire life. Kindergartners, grade 1s and 2s. It wasn't really their fault. The teachers had fed them Pop-Tarts prior to my arrival. So when I got there, the kids were just fueled on refined sugar and going nuts, and the staff all split to the staff room for oh, you're great with kids, Jamie, don't worry. And locked me in this cage with these freaks for 2 hours. It was crazy. And in the middle of the presentation, the little girl said, "Are those your underwear?" "No, you little turkey, talking to prayer flags, not underwear." And I searched through the bags of gear that I brought because any good elementary or high school presentation involves show and tell. So I pulled out all the stuff. I'm hunting through the pitons and the pickets and all the things to find this Ziploc bag, which I knew was in there somewhere, into which there was one of these prayer flags. And I told the story how the young monks in training at the Rumbuk Monastery had been sitting 12, 13 years old and writing these prayers in this ancient Tibetan script, and how the Rinpoche at this particular monastery had given us one of these prayer flags after we left, and it was a great ceremony. Here it was. And medium impressed with that. Yeah, fair enough. I said, well, the reality is on Mount Everest, this couldn't be our underwear because we wear the same pair for about the last 2.5 weeks. We don't wash it, forget it. We don't even take it off. We climb with it the whole time. And it's at that point that the whole room just settled into this reverential silence. Especially the boys were like, oh, so cool. That's great, man. Anyway, I know you've been here a few days, but I'm sure cleanliness is an important part of the success we're celebrating tonight. So hope we don't bond in that fashion. Anyway, off we go to climb the mountain. 1991, I digress. In the fall, we spend 8 weeks struggling on the mountain. Winds blow, avalanches kick up, bad weather, some broken bones, nothing a little duct tape and painkillers can't fix. And we struggle on the mountain, and to save us about 20 minutes here tonight, boom, there's the story, we didn't make it. Why dwell on it? We didn't make it. We failed. We choked. We came about 3,000 feet short. We had the energy, though, to crawl up there with some spray paint, though, and mark our high point. You can see there. It looks good on my laptop. Just looks stupid on the big screen. Anyway, we came home after that expedition. Bright lights of the media waiting us at the airport in Vancouver on Canada's west coast, and our leadership stood before the microphones while the rest of us were in our chairs, sort of sitting, listening, sort of dazed by all the insanity of it. And the media, after about 15 minutes, were getting frustrated that they weren't getting the pithy responses, the soundbite that they were looking for. They wanted something to pin this failure on. And then someone popped up and said, was there anyone in particular that you could maybe assign some responsibility for the failure of your expedition? And the group of us like, oh, God, don't blame me, man. But thankfully he didn't. He sidestepped the questions and kept pressing. What happened up there? And the athletic cliches came. Well, the winds were strong at our face, the snow deep beneath our feet, and blah, blah, blah. But they just didn't accept this. And finally, arrogance and testosterone, a problem of mine, got a hold of me once again. And I stood up and I took the microphone, sort of scooted the leader aside and said, what do you want from us? Would you prefer that we kept climbing to the summit, knowing that it would cost our lives, reached the top, and then died on the way down? Too bad. We'll party without you. But at least you got there. We're dead. You're dead. We're sorry about that. But you got to the summit. Good for you. Now I can laugh, and someone grabbed me, sat me back down, and the press conference wrapped up. And the next day, across the nation's newspapers, read the headline, "Punk climber can't suck up defeat." Absolutely correct on both accords. Punk climber for certain, unable to suck up the defeat, definitely. The following weeks were difficult, but you'd think that things would pass and you'd get over it. But it seemed to leak into a couple months that followed. Not just for me, but for the whole team. I mean, let's not abandon the idea that we'd gone to the mountain by choice in the first place. We weren't there because of circumstances thrust upon us. We had gone there by design. But in that experience, we came home. We failed to reach the summit. There was some scrutiny upon our efforts and decisions made. And then we were supposed to readjust into our life before we'd left. And it just didn't seem to go that well. During the day, it wasn't a problem because there was things to do, food to eat, gear to unpack, friendships to rekindle. It was at night when you were alone with your own thoughts, when the comfort of your pillow was no longer offered, the sheets became irritating. Sleep was now elusive. Sleep deprivation, the long arms of that depression wrapping its arms around you, and then people noticing it in you the next day. Was anything wrong? No. I wonder what was wrong. We were all suffering in our own way. You couldn't really. I mean, who would give you sympathy? Oh, you've gone to climb the mountain. I mean, how tough could your life be that you had such luxury that you could go off and fabricate difficulties for yourself? Yet still within that, we were struggling. Why, though? And each of us sorting it out. If there was a problem, I only wish there was a problem, because if there was, boy, we could design some solution and go after it, solve it, and then move on. But it wasn't anything in particular. It was just kind of everything in general. My whole life, our whole lives have been sort of lifted up and turned over through this experience. That was intriguing unto itself. But what was at the heart of this malaise? After further navel-gazing and self-indulgence, I began to understand that the problem was I didn't know what success was. I mean, I knew what it was as a demonstration of what my parents had tried to set out for me in our middle-class family in Calgary. I knew what it was as a student. I knew what it was as an athlete. I'd already known at 22 now that I would be measured in part by the density of my wallet, by the facades I put forward, the car, the home, these things that we all use to take sort of quick stock of each other, shallow meters, however inaccurate, about who we are and what success we've achieved. But beyond all of that, what is my, by myself, definition of success? And I didn't know. And the experiences on Everest made that realization apparent. And perhaps without it, I would have tumbled along, never having posed the question to myself. And that's what was haunting, and that's what was difficult. And I felt that Everest, but more accurately, adventuring as a whole, was a powerful means, an effective tool by which one might explore and discover maybe some of this definition. And in my study and a conversation with Tim before I came, I thought about this. And I don't want to make cheesy parallels to the world in which you function, because I don't know it. But trying to understand it at the heart of an entrepreneur, I think without maybe sounding trite, I think there is a heart of an adventurer, because much of what you do rings similar to the things that I do on the sides of mountains in different places around the world. Some of you have come from these Fortune 500 companies and gone on and forged out on your own, and surviving after this period of time to be here is testament to your determination. Not just simply surviving, though, making a contribution to your community, as Tim and I spoke, meeting payroll, of course, that's important, but difficult at times, but also thriving. I've chosen the adventure, this physical adventure of rock and snow, and you've chosen this adventure of entrepreneurialism, and you've chosen this vehicle that we celebrate tonight as your means by which some of this can be discovered, a place, a vehicle for the expression of your passion. So I thought in part maybe we would be linked in that regard. You're talking about livelihoods. I guess the difference is I'm talking about lives, which is kind of a major difference, I guess. My day goes bad, you lose some. If your day goes bad, you lose some money. My day goes bad, people die. Might motivate you if we change that around a little bit. Switch things around. Tim, you're quite the driver. You can move things around. Those of you who don't bring in X number of new customers, we kill you. It's effective on a mountain, might be good in corporate America as well. At any rate, there are the similarities. Cheese and bad bridges aside, I think there are some links. So the mission was to go back to the mountain then. If this is a fertile ground for discovery, if this is something to explore, then let's go back to this place and learn about it a little bit more. Let's be more conscious about it. Let's not just be driven for this goal to reach the summit, driven by this goal to achieve profit, but understand maybe what that process, what that effort allows us in understanding and growth, and maybe some wisdom, as crazy as that might seem. So with that idea of going back to the mountain, with an idea to reach its summit, of course, to have that business success, that profitability, we also were going there, at least in my heart, with a sense of defining and understanding some sense of success. Looming behind that question was another, which haunted me for some time, but I pushed it aside because it would be addressed later. Once you go off and define this, will you then have the strength of character to pursue it? Or will you find yourself seduced by pressure, otherwise, peer, who knows what, and drift apart from it? I wasn't sure. But let's not worry about that right now. Let's find out what success is a little bit first. Define it, knowing that it'll evolve and change as time goes. But let's take a stand. Let's pound a peg into the point and depart from there. So back to the mountain we went. Now there was some sense of success already. Lessons taught to me as a young boy at the lap of my mother. One of the great leaders in my life, for whom I'm tremendously grateful for her influence. One of the great lessons my mom taught was analysis of failure, was to take a look at things that had gone wrong in my life and learn from them. So we did that with the expedition. We did that with math tests. We did that with failed dates with girlfriends. Take a look at things. Don't kiss her so quick, Jamie. Slow down. Take your time, boy. Good point. When you're 16, it's difficult, but mom's talking it out. Okay, good. So we do that on the mountain again. Let's go without bottled oxygen. Let's also make some changes on our team. Let's go with fewer climbers, which is a nicer way of saying those people we didn't like, let's not ask them back. You know it is restructuring. Anyway, we'll talk about it something else. I kid. Different season, a different route perhaps on the mountain. Changes, we had 18 in total. I can't share them all now because you know the reasons. 5, more toilet paper. You think that's funny? That's not funny. Deserves some explanation. We ran out of toilet paper on Mount Everest. Bad situation. Yeah, very hard. I don't quite know how to tell this story. But it does illustrate a really important point about analysis of failure, about leadership, about leading. Leadership is so passive, about leading. And I think a story that's so important in the work that you do, the people you inspire, but even beyond all of our corporate lives, even more importantly in our families, with our children. Because so much we push for perfection in our kids. We're focused on what wasn't done well and to sort of encourage them to do it right, and never seeming to be pleased, perhaps, with the performance that's had. And we can really get ourselves as parents, and the role we play as leaders there, we maybe get some confusion. This toilet paper thing was a profound thing for our teammates and myself to understand. See, analysis of failure is not about assigning blame. It's not about pointing fingers. It's about ferreting out the wisdom that's at the core of that hard shell of failure. A hard shell because it's cut into our memory with embarrassment, with the sharp edge of pain, loss perhaps, but at its core, if we crack through the surface, if we take ownership of those mistakes rather than shoving them aside, blaming them on someone else, and running as quickly as we can to distance ourselves physically and through time from them, if we actually go onto them and grab a little piece of them and suck them up, I think by doing that, we earn the right then to take ownership of the victories that will surely follow. And we unlock some of the wisdom that resides at their core. And this is so important. And you can see it, obviously, the application in work and the versions and the beta testing, the information. It's all about mistakes and failure. The information comes back, we make adjustments, we move forward. But on our families, one of the greatest gifts my mother ever gave me was permission to fail. She fostered an environment in which failure was acceptable, encouraging me to do so. Always challenging me to give myself permission to do it. And once I finally did, well, my life's been a bit of a disaster since. But I have been freed from the shackles that come of one's fear of failure. And to her, I owe a great debt because of it. And if we can do that for our children, then I think we offer them something profound, along with, of course, our unconditional love. But fostering an environment in which they can lose the fearful connection to failure. For my mother would teach that failure, Jamie, is a foundation strong onto which you can build a great success in your life. Build it broad and be victorious from there. And so that was what we were trying to do with this expedition. What mistakes did we make? How could we improve upon that? What things went well? How could we get better? And through some analysis and time and discussions with teammates, we put our plan in place, adjusted it as we went, and for the next 2.5 years, trained our bodies. Raised $500,000 US by pounding the pavement, approaching non-traditional investors and sponsors in these kinds of events, understanding and researching who they are, that service, the work that you do every day to acquire them and bring them in the door, the research up front, so that you can begin to offer them through this adventure some return for their investment and a solution to their problems, as far-fetched as it might seem for a bunch of people trying to climb Mount Everest. There was unlimited rejection. But through that muck of rejection, bob the odd yes, bob some acceptance. It is our job to ferret it out, to hunt it relentlessly, to capture it, to covet it, and to take care of it and nurture it. And with those investors, our expedition was off to the mountain. We traveled halfway around the world, loaded up 5 tons of equipment, and journeyed across the Tibetan Plateau. We rose up to the foothills of the Himalaya. In the distance, we saw Mount Everest. For the first time since we'd seen it last with the naked eye. Known as Chomolungma. You see, the locals think of Mount Everest as Chomolungma. It's the rest of the world that thinks of it as Mount Everest, a name given it to by the British during surveys in the region. But Chomolungma, this is the name it's had long before others had seen it, meaning the mother goddess. Basically, the Buddhists believe that Mount Everest is the sanctuary for Mother Nature, her flat, her pad, her hangout. When you get to the base of this mountain, you get the sense that there's something different. Maybe it's all the reading and fantasizing, but it seems like it's more than rock and snow. En route to the mountain, we become friendly with our Tibetan yak herder friends and their children. One evening, about 14,000 feet, 10 days into a 14-day march, they invite us into their tents for dinner. Grateful for the invitation. We crawl into the tent. It's a tent that will afford space for maybe 15 people normally. There's pushing 30 of us in there, so we're jammed in tight, thigh to thigh, shoulder to shoulder. You sneak your way down inside the tent, getting a little claustrophobic, but I'm hungry, so what the hell, snuggling in there. Haven't eaten since breakfast, so you're wondering when food's going to come, but we're guests, don't be rude, just relax. Finally, someone comes in and digs this hole out in the ground before us. It's a tent without a floor, of course. Hole in the roof so you can see the stars, which is nice, but getting a little hungry. Everyone's just smiling. We don't know a whole lot of Tibetan, so there's not a lot of dialogue going on. A little awkward, but not bad. In comes a burlap sack, bleached in the sun, stitched, repaired many times, seen its days. Its contents are poured into the open pit. Out tumbles these chips of dung. Crap. yak crap, yak dung, tumbling into this pond. Like, oh, God, we don't have to eat that. No, it's not. It's for fire. Oh, fire, great. Ambiance, that's nice. I don't know if you've burned a lot of crap. You may have seen some in some previous versions, but I don't know if you've seen. It's not just like that, already trash talking. Tim, I apologize. You started on the phone with me, and I'm up here now, and I'm trash talking. I take it back, in part. They pour a thimble of kerosene on these chips of dung, and the crap doesn't burn great. I don't care what anybody tells you. It's not a great fire. Don't grab the marshmallows. We're not roasting them over a crap fire. Forget it. A lot of smoke, some flame, but it's not for ambiance, you moron. It's for cooking. Oh, cooking, great food, fantastic. My eyes are burning. I can't see across the tent. God, I hope they bring something out to eat. They fire a pot down into the crap and nuzzle it down into burning embers and pour in some water. And it kicks up into a bowl. A handful of tea leaves is tossed in. The lid is nowhere to be seen, long since lost. As the clouds of smoke billow up, this particulate matter is dropping back into the beverage, and this film of stuff is floating on the top. And good Lord, they steep it perfectly, of course, like you could tell, and pour it off into little cups and offer them to the guests. It's a tea of an unusual viscosity. It's a beverage with enough fiber in it to last you a week, really, and something you drink and you just constantly have this desire to spit little bits of crap from your mouth, but spitting on the guy next to you, crap in my mouth. Drink it back, is smiling, and then comes dinner. Someone comes in with this bag of tsampa. Tsampa is it's barley, basically. It's like dirty flour, all crushed up, complex carbohydrate, great for long marches. The Tibetans have been using it for thousands of years. They come in with this stuff. We've known about it, read about it. Wow, tsampa. To which they add some butter to give it a little bit of fat, some sort of binding agent, give it some flavor. But this butter is from the knacks. The crap's from the yaks, and the butter's from the knacks. The knacks are the girls. If you go there to sell software, know the difference. It's important. So this butter's never been refrigerated or pasteurized. So when the lid pops off the container, the smell of it... And gagging's like a sneeze. It's not something that you can necessarily control. Wow. And how do you explain in Tibetan that in Canada to gag before you eat is a sign of respect to the chef? This is going to be great. Good Lord. So they take handfuls of this butter and mix it into the bag of tsampa. And one gentleman works these little balls, golf ball size portions of tsampa. And he's fastidiously making an effort for each portion must be equal to the next. And he's the only guy in the whole group doing any work. He's working the fire, and he's grabbing the butter, and he's rolling the tsampa ball, and he's back on the crap fire. No washing transition between any of the work either. And he hands it over to you, too big to swallow whole. That's one of my general rules when you're in a foreign country and something comes up before you that's a little bit odd. Just fire. Don't chew it. Don't give it a chance for your taste buds to engage. Just with the tip of your tongue, float it up over the roof of your mouth, and boom, back down the throat. That's the best way to do it. But the thing's too big to do that with, so you got chew it and wash it down with a little crap tea. That's some business, that is. Thank you very much for having me. We get out of there thinking, we got to get ourselves clear of camp. We're going to have some trouble here shortly. A few hours pass, nothing happens. Thinking, okay, pretty proud of ourselves. We got quite the constitution. The whole evening went quite well. Interfaced with the locals. It feels good. Okay, let's go to bed. Big day tomorrow. Go to sleep. Wake up about 3 in the morning. Do that sort of body check, when you know some things are off, and you sort of check the body. And you realize, wow, I'm quite cold, but I'm sweating profusely. There's a problem here. Then you realize this is where timing becomes so critical. Minus 32 degrees outside. You don't want to go too soon. You're going to be in this tent and sleeping bag for the next 7 weeks. You don't want to go too late. Okay, you get out the tent. I get outside there. Okay. Find my spot. Boom, turn on my headlamp. Half the team's out there. Hey, Jamie, what's happening? We use more toilet paper over the next 3 weeks than we anticipate for the whole expedition. This food has some kind of violent reaction with our system, unknown before to man, I think. It was crazy. This is how we ran out of toilet paper. Nobody's fault. We'd done all the preparation, all the planning. We had the spreadsheets. We took technique into consideration. Squares, roll, it spit out the number. We had a contingency, add a few extra rolls. How can you go wrong with that? We get to the mountain. How would we have known that this food was going to do this? And when you're on Mount Everest, when you're out of TP, bing, that's it. You're out. Whew, bad situation. Not for the first few weeks, because for the first few weeks we've still got that, motivational, positive attitude thing going. This is not an obstacle. This is an opportunity. And that's acceptable for about 3 weeks until the enormity of the task begins to take its toll. And it snows and the weather don't cooperate with us. And if anybody comes in with any kind of positive attitude about TP, it's licensed to kill them. It's that forced optimism is nauseating. People began to fight and argue about toilet paper. It was the catalyst, the place where we could vent the frustration. Because in reality, we were dealing with the weaknesses of our own person. We saw the raw reality of who we were. These skeletons we could keep at bay, hidden from others, in more hospitable altitude, were sneaking through and exposing themselves as we became tired and fatigued. And you'd sit in your tent in the morning, eating your gruel, looking about the group, wondering, knowing the statistics. Which of those 12 of my teammates? Which 2 are not coming back? And of the 10 that do, who will lose what fingers and toes to frostbite? Oh, these questions rushing through your head. The pressure of it began. People began to fight, began to argue. Gambling games broke out. I'll raise you 2 squares. And fighting about toilet paper. You're wrapping, you need to fold, you're using too much. What are you talking? I've been watching. What do you mean you've been watching? And a big fight would break out among the teammates. In reality, when we came home from that expedition and stood before the media and the question was popped, why did you not reach the summit? The response most accurately would have been, because we ran out of toilet paper. Symbolic of what had occurred. Of course, it wasn't the toilet paper, but the reality was that our team, under the pressures of the environment in which we were trying to function, albeit by choice, but again, you're in business by choice. Now, perhaps out of necessity. But you got there by choice. Under these pressures, we began to turn inward. We began to turn our backs on the goal that we were unified toward and began becoming territorial, watching our own space, making sure no one encroached on our stuff, watching other team members and how much effort they were making. And when they were sick, wondering if they were really sick, and maybe they were just faking being sick, because if they were faking being sick, then they could rest. While I go up the mountain and bust my butt to get up there to climb the peak, while you all of a sudden, when I'm too tired to go, oh, look at you, feeling better. Are we? Fancy that. And then you go to the summit. Well, forget it. I'm sick too. And sitting back in camp. And here our team is battling about these things. And the windows of opportunity are opening and closing. Small. Absolutely small. It was a bad weather year on the mountain, yeah. That much worse than any other? It is Mount Everest, after all. What are you expecting? Wind at your back, firm snow beneath your feet, and balmy conditions? It's going to be difficult. You knew that, but we missed it. Out of our own weaknesses, we missed it. Sitting on my desk is that roll of toilet paper to remind me how easily perspective can be lost. How powerful are the lessons to be found in our failures. And what a waste it would be not to be accountable beneath them, to take ownership of them, to learn from them, and then to really own our victories that follow. So we continued on our journey toward the mountain. This is the high-tech diaper in Tibet. We're developing a real theme here tonight. I apologize. A game of tag broke out among the kids. That's what that picture reminds me of. They had a bit of an advantage with this diaper. They didn't have to break from the game. They were acclimatized to 14,000 feet, so in the Great Canadian Way, we began to knock a few kids down just to even things up. Just a couple hip checks here and there. We ended in a tie. Everything was fine. We arrive at base camp at 17,000 feet, and the journey begins. Who was the first to climb Mount Everest? Anybody remember? Sir Edmund Hillary, absolutely. Beekeeper from New Zealand, living in England. fantastic mountaineer, still alive today. 1953, the 29th of May, he stood upon the summit. Similar time to the coronation of the Queen. First to do it, along with Tenzing Norgay. They came home. Others had come close. Mallory, Irving, two other fantastic British mountaineers in the 20s. These were real tough explorers. They pounded nails through the soles of their boots to get purchased through the snow. They had tea with the Queen prior to their departure, and there was the same jackets they had departed with her that they were climbing on the mountain with. Clouds drifted in when they were 1,000 feet, 300 meters short of the summit. They were never seen again, and to everyone's wonderment, did they reach the summit, die on the way down, or die en route? Fascinating question. A couple of years ago in the spring, their bodies were found, searched for a camera. Frozen on their corpse in the dark, the plates would have been preserved. Nothing found. For which I was grateful. It's nice to leave some things to ripple on in our imagination. But it was Hillary and Tenzing in 53 who got there. Wonderful story. Hillary wrote a great book I read as a young boy, a passage in which caught me off guard, though. He said, Everest, and this is after they've climbed, and understand before they climbed, Hunt and all the very military approach in many ways to these expeditions, there was a sense of conquer, going to do battle, to beat this mountain. Then Hillary comes back and has the audacity, in my opinion, to write a passage that says, Everest is never conquered. Occasionally it tolerates a momentary success. Whoa, what do you mean it's not conquered? Everybody talks about conquering. Everyone who's gone before, everyone who's come since, it's all about conquering. We're going to conquer, we're going to battle. This sort of coincided with what my father was trying to teach me as a young boy. But through my adolescence, my father had some very difficult mental difficulties, basically. It peaked out when I was about 17, coinciding with my peak of my adolescence. It was just a total nut bar, basically. It seemed to be something in the water, because a lot of my friends' dads were suffering the same thing. But my dad seemed to have a particularly bad case. He was sad. Now I'm 34 now, and Dad's pretty much smarter now than he's ever been. I'm a dad myself, in fact. Pretty much every day, my dad's getting smarter and smarter. It's great. I'm happy, really happy for him. But there was that time in my teenage years where he was a lunatic. And he was basically saying stuff like that over dinner. You know, I'd be sitting there talking to a buddy about a big climb we're off to do the next morning. Dad said, I have an idea for you, boy. What, Dad? I think after you conquer that route on Mount Assiniboine, you should go to the west coast to conquer the tide. Stop the tide from coming in. Work with the moon. You guys can do it. Okay, Dad, good idea. Thanks for that. Mom, can we go? Yeah, take your dish. Pew, we're gone. 4 o'clock in the morning, we're up, heading out the door, got our bags packed, we're going up to the mountains, early start. Dad's up making breakfast for himself and 2 imaginary friends. Well, why let the food go to waste? We sit down and eat with him. Doesn't say much. We eat up as much as we can. Big effort toward us for us the day. We get out the door, pretty clean, no comments from Dad. Then he comes running out in his goofy jammies. He's got $20 in his hand for gas. Hey, I got to roll down the way. Yeah, Dad. You know, after you do that moon tide thing, I was been thinking about this for you guys tonight. I think you should stop the sun, conquer it from rising. The 2 of you can do that. Grab the money, drive off. My dad was trying to tell me the same thing Hillary was trying to tell me, but I couldn't hear him. Through the own insanity of my own mind, I couldn't speak the language, or wasn't willing to. You can't conquer this mountain, boy. If that was the case, what was it that we were trying to conquer? With every step on this expedition, it became more and more clear to me what the real foe was. For 7 weeks, we struggled with Mount Everest on that year, climbing the Super Couloir, cleft in the north face. Avalanches fell, storms brewed, people complained, we struggled on. It was time for our summit push. As the leader of the team, went through the group, talking, no stress. We could lead by consensus at this point, discussing, getting feedback, and then went away and made my decision. Difficult one. Although most of the team members were tired and beaten, they know they couldn't go for the summit. But there were a group of 4 who had the strength, but only 2 could go. To choose between them was difficult. John McIsaac and Dennis Brown proved themselves over the previous weeks, had the most consistent record, and seemed to be the tightest team clicking together. They were chosen. The bad news delivered to the other 2, and in their moment of desperation, the disappointment reminded them of the covenant into which they'd entered to as this team back at home, that if they were called upon by the summit, they would depend upon their team to back them as though they who were going. And if they weren't going themselves, that they needed to be that backer. And that was the role they now had. And would they rise up to it? And they did. So we loaded our backpacks with supplies, left John and Dennis in the top camp, and pushed up to the 2nd, and the 3rd, and 4th, finally to our highest camp that now wasn't established. On a steep face of rock and snow, we cut a platform with our ice axes. And there we put a tent and unloaded our backpacks with food, fuel, ropes, and so forth. And the last of our energy in the day's light descended down the mountain, allowing John and Dennis to come up unencumbered, crawl into those sleeping bags, melt the snow, and make some tea, some soup. And with no sleep at all, at midnight, they put on them all of their clothing, their headlamps, their helmets, and they crawled out into the darkness of night and began climbing. Their headlamps stabbing out and illuminating these circles before them. Their world into which they climbed for 6 hours until finally the sun rose and the Himalaya exploded in the dawn of light. And after these hours of climbing and the cold and the previous days and weeks added together, Dennis began to feel the effects. I wondered if maybe he wasn't the best decision. But he worked so hard and he performed so well, leading through the darkness. He was lagging behind John, and we could see them, although we were in lower camps watching through our binoculars. We were cheering them on through our radios. None of us had any time to sleep. Finally, Dennis took a break and huddled with John. It was decided that he couldn't go on safely. He had to retrace his steps with what strength he had left. The question was, would John continue? Dennis guaranteed him that he'd be safe. So John went on by himself. Dennis made his way back down to that camp with a promise to stay there until John returned, melting snow to give him something warm to drink upon his return, and a flash of light every 15 minutes rotating on the hour in the darkness, a beacon by which to navigate. They parted. John kept climbing for 9 more hours. He'd been climbing for 15 hours when he came up on the mountain, unsure of where he was, for the storms that were brewing in the valley floor now had engulfed much of the upper peak. And he got shade from some rocks and got down behind some rock to get out of that wind that had been sucking him of his energy, just wondering where he was. You don't really need a map here to navigate. The route is very clear. You know, you step here, you die. You step there, you die. You got a 2-foot ridge in front of you. That's pretty much where you have to go. But where on that ridge was he? How close to the summit was he? He'd studied the maps. He'd pored over the photographs. He'd spoken to many other climbers who'd been there before or come close. Where was he at that moment, knowing that minutes separate footsteps? Finally, the clouds parted, and he pulled out his camera he had beneath his coat to keep warm, and he snapped a photo. This photo. A photo of the mountain. Sorry, this is after sunrise. He snapped this shot. Poorly exposed, really badly framed, but you should give him a break. He's 162 meters from the summit. Meters. That's no good in America. A block and a half. A block and a half. 40 minutes worth of climbing to go. Yet it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you were there, 40 minutes from the summit, so much of the climb done now, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We get equal day and darkness at this part of the world at this time of year. The sun's going to set in a few hours, and it's going to be dark. And he's got at least 12 hours, 14 hours of descent. The descent is not much faster than the ascent. On tired legs, and it don't go that more quickly. 10 hours in the dark, 40 more minutes to the summit, a couple minutes on top. Takes a photo. Get back down to here. Jeez. But you know you're not coming back next weekend. You know. This is it's an interesting situation to be in here, where we begin to see an unusual battle. I would think in part a battle you're maybe familiar with, considering the accomplishment to survive, to have been here, to be rewarded as the adventure of entrepreneurialism, that battle between passion and obsession. There's no line really between the two, no front of delineation. One just sort of bleeds into the other. This passion we admire in others, we want to foster, this passion that we hope to gather momentum as a result of this gathering and go forward until we meet again. This passion that we hope to foster in our children. When does it bleed and become into obsession? Obsession that's destructive, manifest in our greed perhaps, that costs our relationships with our children as we fool ourselves that we think we can have quality time that makes up for quantity. With our own bodies, we think, okay, we don't treat it well because we're working hard, and our business cards, rightfully so, say that the last to go home at night. That's my role. And indeed, that's what it takes, that passion. When does that go too far? We don't take care of ourselves. Then we think, okay. I'm going to, for a week, I'm going to eat nothing but grapefruits. And on Sunday, I'm going to walk for 12 hours. And then you become obsessed about being healthy, and it's destructive. And that gets crazy. I don't think we have to go to Mount Everest to find this struggle. We can find it here. In fact, it's more difficult to manage, I think, because there it's a world of black and white. Step here, step there, die, live. Feedback's very immediate. Here, we're living in these shades of gray. Wow. But as with John and as with us, we can only make those decisions. As many taps on our shoulders come, as many questions, offers of concern from friends and family when they note it in us, perhaps we're pushing too hard. Only we can make the decision when it's appropriate to back off, to recuperate. Not to quit, but maybe to begin anew. And only John can make that decision. And sitting there, seduced by the chance to reach the summit, having come so far, but such a distance to go, so late in the day, he finally pulls his radio from his climbing jacket and calls down to us. We've been resting for 15 minutes, but you can hear in his voice the difficulty it is just to breathe, let alone to even walk and continue. This is what John had to say.
Okay, John, how do you feel? Well, I feel fatigued, disappointed, relieved, I guess. I can't go up anymore without jeopardizing my life. I've accepted that. I don't have it in me. Not this time. Not the sequence that took place. To make it to the top. Oh.
The thing that seems so strange about that is that he could accept that close, that I don't think ego ambition would have allowed me to it. He had the strength of character to say, hey, I can't do this. He could accept it and turned his back on the summit and began working his way down the mountain, rather than foolishly pretending otherwise and kept going, heroically perhaps, to his death. No, he was more sensible than that, stronger than that, and began working his way down the mountain. But his progress was slowed with every step, and he just didn't seem to be doing well. Maybe he'd extended himself too far already. And through our binoculars, we could see he wasn't moving as he needed to. So we rallied the troops for our rescue. It had been planned and organized. Now it was time to execute it, unfortunately. Into our backpacks, we thrust emergency bottles of oxygen. We put thermoses of hot chocolate, to which we had those little tiny marshmallows. Do you have those in America and the rest of the world? Because in Canada, we have hot chocolate with little tiny marshmallows. Oh, that's good. If you're having trouble closing some client, maybe someone new customer, and they're just going to bogging. And now, I understand the managers are more scrupulous about purchase and so forth, a little tighter budget. Just have me over. I'll whip everybody up some hot chocolate, sprinkle in those marshmallows. Bang, the deal's done. So we got this hot chocolate in our backpack. We got the emergency bottle of oxygen. We're moving up the mountain, full speed to get to John. Now, full speed, that's something that needs to be clarified. This is full speed on Mount Everest. Take a step and 15, 16 breaths between steps. That's all you want to let yourself take. Although you like a lot more, you count them out. I can't keep going because I'm going to pass out, but you get the idea. And that's full speed. People down below are looking up through the binoculars. Wow, those guys are kicking butt. 2/3 of the world's oxygen is beneath us at this point. Not that there's any less oxygen per se percentage in the air. The difference is the barometric pressure has changed. And that oxygen just isn't passing through the membranes, getting into our bloodstreams. 2/3 gone. We're functioning on, at best, 1/3 of our normal capacity. Not only is it impairing your body's physiological response, but your psychological, your mental faculty as well. It's shot. You sit there in the morning and you're looking at your boots at 26,000 feet, 8,000 meters. And you're looking, and you take 10, 12 minutes to figure out what's your left boot and what's your right boot. Studying the print. And the fact that you put a big L and a big R on each one, anticipating this problem back home, doesn't seem to help you out at this moment. So you throw your boots on. It takes a couple extra minutes to tie the laces because you got to get the little rabbit ears and work it all out because you can't remember how the pattern goes. Then you climb for 3 hours and you think, God, my feet are killing me, man. You stop, you pull over, you switch your boot. Wow, that's better. And you keep climbing. This is just not a place where human beings belong. The messages are coming with the nausea and all the other insanities. Like, I know, just a quick visit and we're done. I promise it won't take too much time. We don't belong here. So what do we think we're going to do? Race up the mountain and grab John and lift him up and carrying him down? Forget it. You can hardly move on your own accord. We can get to him with this oxygen, give him some extra strength, get a little extra saturation in his blood. We can give him this hot chocolate, this warmth to his core, some calories, We got maltodextrin added to it for some complex chain carbos. We get him off the mountain. En route, we're shouting to him through our radio, we're coming up, John, you got to keep moving because the desire is to stop. And when you're really, really cold, what do you want to do? Sleep. You're absolutely right. Sleep. Wow. You just want to take a little nap, want to have a little snooze. A little break will do me some good. I'm going to just crawl beside this boulder out of the wind. I have a little nappy. No problem. John, you're going to freeze to death. No, I'm not that cold. No, I don't feel so bad, actually. Yeah, you don't feel so bad because you're numb, because you're freezing. You have no idea how cold you are. Come on, I've been at this a long time. I just need a little break. John, you go to sleep, you're going to die. You must keep going. You've got to keep moving. Panic in our voice had to be relayed to him. We wanted it to. He needed to know the urgency of it. He was being seduced. You could see him being lulled into that sleep. Death, ubiquitous, would see its chance, swoop down, wrap its arms around him, and swirl him. It happened to another friend of mine. And when you look through the annals of climbing, you'll see stories of it everywhere. That cold. Oh, it's so warm. Just a little sleep. And then I'll be right back. No, that's not the case. And in this panic, shouting over the radio. Someone says, our voices, we're not connecting. We got to make a phone call. We got to call home. We got to get John. We got to get his wife on the line. Man, we got desperate maneuver. Hook up a satellite phone call back to North America, mountain town in Jasper, half a world away. The phone rings. John's wife gets on the line. Within half a minute of the conversation, John's two little girls burst through the doors of the master bedroom. You can hear them in the background. Mom, oh, it's your dad. You could hear them racing off, arguing between the two of them who will get what phone. They cut their mom off. Oh, there's stories to tell. They haven't talked to their dad in 5 weeks. It's May. School's almost out. There's stuff to talk about. Alicia has a new boyfriend. Dad doesn't like him. But Daddy, really, you're not here, so what can you do? Good point. Smart kid. Leanne, not to be outdone, they have a new dog. Keeps pooping by the carpet at the fridge. Tells a great story of how it's in her toes. Then they stop. 6, 7 minutes into the conversation, they stop, wondering whether Dad isn't responding. All he offers is his silence. I don't think we had a clue, most of us, what we were getting ourselves into. The men and women of our team were largely single. We understood the forces of ego, ambition, cold, wind, gravity. I don't think we had a clue about this force of love that we were tapping into. Foolishly, perhaps. Now we've drawn them into it. What if he's already dead? Did Daddy turn his radio off? Did he's not? You know, Liam, maybe your dad did turn the radio off. He's just, you're trying to conserve batteries. But if you keep talking to him, when he turns it on and you'll be there, what a great surprise that'll be. So you keep talking. Okay. So some more stories. Knowing full well that wasn't the truth. Protocol dictates you'd keep it on. Batteries were fresh. We loaded them there the day before. He'd have it on. Girls keep talking. That'll last a few more minutes. Then they get scared. Then they get mad. Isn't that the facade we often use, our anger, to protect fear, hurt? Shouting at their dad, you've got to get up, Daddy. I'm going to my secret place. I remember that. You could hear it through our radios. You can go into my secret place. And they'd hang up the phone and go off somewhere secret in the house, only to come back a few minutes later. Get up, Daddy. Come on now. You promised. Promise. Then what did your daddy promise? Maybe you forgot the... Dad, how could you forget the promise? Remember? Tell him the promise. Remind your dad of the promise. Well, what was the promise? Tell us the promise. Tell your daddy. Remember, Daddy? And then she told the story. At the airport, they got past the flight attendant. They got up to their dad, and they grabbed him, and they gave him a big hug, and he got down, and they tell the story in such detail, and how he'd wiped their tears away from their cheeks, and they gave him a big hug together, and said, hey, you guys, come on. Don't cry. It's okay. I'll be back. I promise I won't die on Mount Everest. I love you. Now you take care of your mom. I'll be back. See you soon. I got on the plane. That was the promise. And with that promise, John began to move, kicking in his crampons. Yeah, getting up, going for his radio. His voice too cold, it's too dry. His Daddy, don't talk, you just keep moving, And he'd work his way down the mountain, fall in the snow. He'd take these breaks, and the girls, right there, come on, Papa, get up, picking him up. Through the satellite phone, these girls carried her down off the mountain. 7 hours of it, back and forth. 3 hours into it, I was thinking, oh, God, we should have called Collect. I'm going to work the budget, too. Of course, we never would have. It was a $32,000 phone bill when we got home, U.S. So that's a few placements, isn't it? Those girls got their dad off that mountain back to our top camp. The rescue continued. We had 40 more hours ahead of us, though. Gravity now was our ally rather than a foe we struggled against. With the ropes, we rigged up a rescue, and down the mountain we went. In this photograph, though it's difficult, in the bottom left-hand side, about a third in from the right, you can see a little cluster of black dots, 2 in the front and then a group of 3. That's 2 people out front looking for crevasses, and a group of 3 in the back pulling John in a bag across the snow, who was unconscious. His pulse was so weak, my fingers so cold, I couldn't pick it up from time to time. Didn't know if he was dead or alive. Didn't matter. Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. Too dangerous to stop. We got to get him down to our makeshift hospital. Once we got him there, 40 hours later, we stripped him naked. 2 of us jumped in there naked as well to warm his core, and gave him some oxygen and IV to get some fluid through the body and some core warmth. 3 hours after that, his pulse stabilized. Although weak, it was stable. His breathing pattern was a little bit stronger and more consistent. This photo was taken 7 days later when someone got the thought at that point to even take one. His face was no longer white as it had been. His lips were purple, but they were now sunburnt. He couldn't really speak, but through the tears in his eyes, you could see his gratitude. The evacuation continued. We got him home to his family and to some hospital care. It took him about 7 months before he could run a flight of stairs at home without some pain in his chest. Well, our expedition in '94 was over at that point. Our nerve was shot. Our supplies were dwindling. The weather turned. We grabbed a few more cans of spray paint, jogged up there where John was, and marked our high point. And we came home to the media pressing us in the conference. We met with John in the antechamber with his family, wheeling his wheelchair, his kids there. Great celebration. Then we walked out front into the media. Now I realized, yeah, it's my turn to answer the questions. Lamely, I suspect. The teammates sitting off to the side, I was just waiting for someone to come up and save me. There wasn't the defensiveness. There wasn't the ego and aggression that had been there before. There was, though, a sense of what had occurred on the mountain. A piece of success had dropped into place for us. It was defining success about perspectives, about peaks, about people. And the shame was that it took a crisis for us to figure it out. I tried to explain that as best I could. Gave some sort of sound bite. Packed up and went home and unpacked. My mom invited me over to the house for some cookies. Chocolate chip, my favorite. Oh, yeah, okay, I'm on my way. Which is really, when a woman does that kind of thing, it's not really when they invite you over, we should have a talk, which is entirely misleading. Because it's not really about a talk. It's not about conversation. It's not about back and forth. It's about her talking and you listening. It's all part of the cult of motherhood, I'm discovering. My wife now, we have our little boy, he's 23 months. And I can see it happening with him, and I just look on, helps. I can do nothing for you, boy. So what are the cookies for? The cookies are to lure you in. It goes on beyond that, though. And isn't it a coincidence that you walk through the front door, boom, a batch is coming out of the oven, 2 dozen already sitting on those little metal racks cooling off for you, and a glass of frosty milk on the table? Coincidence? I don't think so. And you sit down and you start talking, and all of a sudden, every time you talk, boom, a cookie in your mouth. So you can't talk. That's the whole idea of the cookies. And there's more to the cookies than just a mechanical advantage that your mother has over you or any woman you might encounter. It's the sugar. You start firing these cookies, you become hypoglycemic. And as such, you're vulnerable to their persuasion. That's why the cults feed you sugared drinks and keep you up late at night. Same business that your mothers are doing. So you're just sitting there, and she's like, what happened? You grilling you on them? And pretty soon all you hear is just like coding. And you can't respond. Just like, written in the back of your head. What happened, son? What did you get? Is crisis the only way you learn? Is that the only way you're going to learn things in your life? I can tell you things, but you have to learn through crisis. And when you learn these lessons through crisis, well, in that period just after the crisis, there's all sorts of learning. And then it kind of wears off, doesn't it, Jamie? It's very unfair, this whole thing, but that's what happens. So she keeps drawing this thing by the stove. Here's all this wonderful learning after your crisis. And then pretty soon, in 2 years, you're going to pretty much forget all those lessons and make the same mistakes coming out some other way. Is that just going to happen? I don't know. It's a good point. Okay, no, I'm not going to let that happen. Fine. Well, then the expedition has some value, then doesn't. Okay, fine, it does. Now get out of here. Okay, see you later. Take some cookies. Yeah, okay, thank you. And the cookies, you think that's a gift. No, that's just her way of having, it's a marketing ploy. She has impressions in your brain in the weeks to come as you eat them. It's all part of this sneaky business. You're forgetting something else, son. Yes, I love you, Mom. Mwah. See you later. And what else? And I'm going back. Yes, you are. Yes, I am. And get up there this time, she says. I'm tired of this business. Okay. Make a list, boy. Okay. Improve your version. Why not? So we began writing and scribbling and planning, preparing. What are we going to do differently next time? How are we going to learn from our previous mistake? To go back, because we've come so close. How could we not? The south side is some of the improvements we make. Specialty teams to make our team more efficient as possible. Purchase equipment so we're not held slaves to contra deals. More Pringle potato chips. This will be a key to our expedition. Now focus. The Pringles deserve some explanation because being at altitude, and there's no other great way to explain it, is like having the flu. Just that sense of your body, the ache and the nausea. But most accurately, and we can discover a little of this later, it's like having the nastiest hangover you can imagine. And I'm not talking a couple extra glasses of wine with tonight's dinner. I'm talking about the back of the room shots. I'm talking tequila to Bailey's and everything in between. And I'm talking waking up tomorrow, missing the morning sessions, getting up at noon, wearing about 3/4 of the clothing you currently have on, and the print of the bathroom tile stuck to your face for a week. That's the situation we're talking about. When you get up tomorrow feeling like that, like you got dung in your mouth, that is when you've arrived at Base Camp Mount Everest. And at that moment, what do you want to eat? Do you want to eat some sort of bird food and tree bark and all that healthy stuff? No. You don't want to eat anything until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I know nothing of this, and I know most of you don't either. But perhaps you witnessed it in some of your college friends. But tonight, we'll take advantage of the generosity of the evening sponsors to do a little Everest experiment. What do you want at that point, 3 o'clock on one of those crazy evenings? You want some kind of fast food, deep fried and refried twice again, preferably. Explain to yourself and friends that you need the grease to lubricate yourself back into reality. To float your boat because you're kind of walking awkward and canked a little bit. Same thing happened on Mount Everest. Well, we couldn't get fast food, so we were taking potato chips for some reason. Oh, potato chips, yeah, we need potato chips. Saturated in fat, salt, and all those great flavors. Potato chips, yeah, we'll take potato chips. Well, we took potato chips in a bag. Bad idea on Mount Everest. Because as you climb up in elevation, the barometric pressure decreases, the bags begin to swell up. Pretty soon they're exploding in your backpack. You're walking along. You think you're getting attacked by Gurkhas. Buddhists, my ass, they're coming after us. But no, it's your potato chips exploding in your backpack. Then you get to camp, you unzip your stuff, and like, man, I got the sour cream and onion. Jesus. And for the rest of the trip, you're explaining to the team that that's why your underwear smells that way. It was the... forget it. So you've wasted the chips, but every once in a while you'd find a bag crushed, but its contents not dispersed all over the place as it normally was. And you take this little bag and you sneak off into your tent and you crawl in there and have a little dinner for one. And you eat the chips like this. And this, you have no idea the profound impact it is to eat the potato chips crushed into a powder like that. It's immoral. It causes a whole host of emotional distress, bipolar, schizophrenia. You need the chip in all its glory. This is where we came to have appreciation for Procter & Gamble, for the geniuses at that company, and I suggest you donate all the software you can to these people. Have come up with chips in a can. On the side of a mountain, these shells are like little packages of love on the side of the mountain. I mean, think of most chips when you open the bag. You can feel the bad juju, the angst, the big tough chips on top, all the busted ones at the bottom. But not a can of Pringles. You want to talk teamwork? Oh, talk Pringles. Imagine at the factory, all the chips assembling before they jump in the can. After you? No, I think you should go too first. After you. And then they get into the can, and what are they doing? They're spooning and cuddling each other and loving. Just waiting to be eaten. Now, don't eat Pringles here. They're poisonous. They're nasty. They'll kill you. Go to Mount Everest. You're probably going to die. Eat what you want. See, on the mountain, we're eating 12,000 calories every day. Except we don't feel well. Thus, we're trying to find ways to get things into our mouth that we taste good. And we're losing 25, 30 pounds. You want to lose weight? Go to Mount Everest. We could have like maybe the next release, we could have a celebration. V7 fat camp on Mount Everest or something. So you come home dropping pounds up there. But But the Pringles now, an empty can, of course, I tried to keep it full, but I keep eating it. An empty can sits beside the roll of toilet paper on my desk, reminding me of a lesson taught to us on this failure on Everest in 1994. So often we're looking for these fantastic, magical solutions. And I can only imagine the problems you have to solve on behalf of the customers and clients you call upon and offer this vehicle to do it. But really, I think sometimes the solutions themselves are simple. And if we can communicate that, because we think it has to be so fantastic, Microsoft jumping in, and now all the competitors, these giants that you do battle with on a regular basis. Oh, it's fancy this and fancy that. Yet sometimes the beauty, I think, is the simplicity of the solution. The magic comes with the consistency of its application. The magic for the people who are using the stuff that you give it is their knowledge of it and the consistency of their use. Then they'll see the rewards and the belief. Then they become the spokespeople and the marketing and advertising unto themselves. Communicating that. Because Everest is not climbed in some fantastic leap that nobody else knows about. Everest is climbed in simple steps available to all of us, taken consistently. Some yield little progress. Some find themselves getting further away from our objective. But if we keep taking them day after day, week after week, month after month, with some intelligence and some adjustments as we go, these simple steps can yield magical outcomes. And the Pringles, along with the toilet paper, can be a profound reminder of that. And it strikes me in many ways that this perspective might be useful for you to offer to the people you work for and for your own life, perhaps. It was invaluable to me. And so with that in mind, the simplistic yet consistent approach, we began planning for our next expedition. There was $500,000 to raise, bodies to train, team members to select. And off we went, half a world away with the high hopes 3 years later of reaching the lofty summit finally. We walked through the Himalayan peaks, giants in their own right, but bumps in comparison to the mountain itself. Finally, we arrive in base camp, but not without the help of the yaks. You can see here that's a knack in the front and a yak in the back. You can see the differences. We arrive in base camp and assemble our team. Canadians, some Americans, and some Sherpa teammates. Sherpas now become our friends after 8 years of climbing together. They lend not only their strength, but their knowledge of the mountain, having lived at its base for 400 years. Their buoyancy of spirit, their Buddhist approach to life, their ease of smile, all lend great value to our experience, and we're grateful for their friendship that they offer. With their help, we established 4 camps, the first of which is on the other side of the Khumbu Icefall, a glacier that descends over a 2,000-foot cliff that moves about 1 meter, 3 feet each day. And as it does, this river of ice busts up in huge chunks, some of them the size of this incredible conference center. As it moves, also great fissures, crevasses open up beneath our feet, across which we must get. We use ladders, 10-foot lengths of aluminum ladders, simply tied together to span them. As you walk across the ladder, you have to look down at your feet. Some of them are 300-400 feet deep. Sherpas joke, if you fall here, you pop out in America. Deep. As you look down, this is the view that you have. A lot of people think, why are you doing this, man? Why? Great question. For every mountaineer, a different answer, but for me, as I tried to articulate earlier about that discovery, not only of reaching the summit, but that sense, that learning that might come of it, and it was sealed in this icefall on this day across this ladder, I began to understand in an instant more clearly what it was I was doing battle with. It wasn't the mountain. It was, in fact, nothing external. It was my fear. It was my fear, in this case, of dying, of being hurt, but symbolic, manifesting other fears, fears of failure, fears of the unknown, fears of ridicule, fear of judgment, fear of success, that it might be a fluke and we couldn't repeat it. All these fears that we battle and encounter in our lives in one form or another, like shackles around our ankles, locking us into place. Our heart's beating, but we're just existing. We're not really living because we're trapped by this fear. And if you think about the things in your life that you haven't done, is it fear that stopped you? Or the great accomplishments in your life? Was it the tangible accomplishment that really rewarded you? Or was it the fear that you overcame and the growth that you experienced to get there that was the real reward? Well, it's the same thing here on the mountain. And how do you battle it? Is it something complex, something fancy, something to be read in the self-help section? Or is it something simple? I believe it's the latter. It's about focus and concentration and about choice, not something innate, but something learned. Where do we put our focuses? On the rungs of the ladders or on the crevasses that riddle our route? And sure, I've got notes and notes about a hard economy and difficult times and some people who were here years ago and are no longer here, and challenges and difficulties, and not to make light of their challenges, but they fell into the crevasses. And the more difficult the challenge we set for ourselves, the more crevasses will riddle our route. And how do we get past them? Well, we use the rungs of our ladders. We use events like this, the knowledge that we gain, the relationships that we build. These are our tools. These are our ladders. The new stuff that's offered, the new tools, the new versions, the session tomorrow where you can meet with the committee and talk to them, separate from all the company and whose feelings you might hurt, and really pour out. And I challenge you to pour it out tomorrow, because that is building the ladder. The tools. And I believe that when we focus on those things rather than the crevasses, albeit we should never forget them, for that would be foolish and disrespectful. Acknowledge their presence, but don't dwell on them. And they come in the shape of competitors and economy and so forth, most of it beyond our control. We focus on the rungs of the ladder, this team, the support, the form of our family and so forth. In that instant, we've forgotten about the fear. And when that focus is here, a step can be taken, for a shackle is released. And with one step naturally comes another. And with another, momentum is gained. And with that momentum, a fear can be conquered, passed through. On the other side of the fear, we discover freedom. Wow, freedom. Freedom, to me, in part, is the purpose of our living. The pursuit, the attainment, and the responsible sharing of that freedom with others. Made possible by our courage and our willingness to focus and concentrate and make our choice every day, day after day, consistently. And not everyone can do it. People die on the mountain as well. 7 people died while we were there, among them some friends. Some stories should be left unsaid. And we keep pushing through the wind and the storm, and then finally on the 22nd of May, we're in a top camp. We test our emergency oxygen systems and bed down for what we hope will be sleep, but certainly we know it won't be. For by midnight, we'll be stirring and moving toward the summit. And when we crawl out of our tent in the coolness of the night, there's a moon full awaiting us, and no wind blowing, very little. It's almost felt like an invitation to the summit, this gray light reflecting off the snow and ice, and we climbed. Pretty soon we're moving faster than anticipated, legs filled with strength, oddly enough, lungs not so struggling to breathe now. It felt like maybe this was one of those days for which we were born. And around the corner we climbed ahead of schedule until the final cruxes of the route, small passageways, knife ridges, steep rock and snow, yielded to a patch of pure white set against the cobalt blue I'd never known before. And 10 feet short of a summit that I'd been chasing since I was 12, I stopped and waved my Sherpa friends through, wanting them to go first as a gesture of the team's gratitude. And at 6:50 a.m. on the 23rd of May, Lakpa and Gelbu stood upon that peak, and with Nepali flags flapping in wind and rice to offer on behalf of the Dalai Lama, they celebrated, and a few minutes later, Jamie, come. I kicked the final steps and joined them on top. And like a good little marketer, before the thin air robbed me of my last strength, I fired out a flag of our sponsors, thanking them for extending their palm into which we could step to realize a dream, a gift greater than the money they'd offered. And thank you. Thank you. For 45 minutes, we savored the view, and then the Sherpas descended, and I lingered alone on the summit. 1 foot in Tibet, 1 foot in Nepal. Just wanted to stand there for a couple of seconds, just so I could suck it all up, so I could take it home, so I could share it with friends and family who had made it possible. You could feel the mass of this mountain beneath you. Just, I realized that for the first time in my life, in that moment, there was no more struggle. There was no more up. And when these 2 constant companions finally parted, this struggle and this up, all that remained was peace. No conquer on this day, only gratitude for a peace I never even knew existed. And it seemed only right to surrender to it in that moment. I spread my arms out and turned in 360 degrees and looked out above all else. beyond the horizons that I'd known. See the curvature of the earth. And began our descent. Walked off the mountain and returned home. And through other adventures in a circuitous route to here. New adventures. Adventures of parenthood for me. And all kinds of other things await. And what to say? All this has taught me a few things, one of which is there's so much more to learn. So much more to discover. But one thing I can, or a few things I can say for certain, is that, yeah, we toil in the valley floor a lot. But in the distance is a summit, scoured in wind, veiled behind cloud, but it awaits us. I believe those summits are a birthright. I believe they are an inheritance. They can't be taken or stolen. Sometimes they indeed need defending, should never be taken for granted. But they await us. And these summits are small patches of snow like Everest, the size of this podium, on which a few footprints might fit, but more than you might think. And I know that to climb there alone will be empty and hollow, and that we should climb together, which in part I believe an evening like this is a testament to that joint effort. For our memory will lock it into reality. That en route to this place, we'll encounter fears, and if we keep focusing and pushing through them, there will be freedom on the other side that will warrant the effort. That we need to go to this place. And we need to come back and encourage others to do the same. And that when we go there, the view prospected offered will be well worth the effort. I believe out there now, considering what you've toiled through to get here of late, a new summit awaits you with a vista more fantastic than you could imagine. But you will. Because you'll see it. The journey begins now. The summit awaits you. Go to it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks. Don't worry. No, don't worry about that. Not necessary. Thank you. Thanks. Good night. Thank you.